It doesn't even turn on anymore.
Can you see the agenda on the screen? Yes, that's good. That's what mine did earlier. Here, I had to turn it off and restart it to get it to turn on.
Very sensitive.
We're on and everything's recording.
All right, we can go ahead and get started.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is the City of Escalon Planning Commission meeting for September 13th, 2022. Would you all please stand and join us in a flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Staff, can we please have a roll call?
Commissioners Willis,
Here.
Engel,
Present.
Castellanos,
Here.
Vice Chair Sarkozy,
Here.
Chair Stroman.
Here. Thank you. Please note all cell phones, pagers, and similar devices need to be set on silent or vibrate mode or turned off unless you're an on-duty emergency responder. First item on the agenda is the consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and will be approved with one motion. The only item on the consent calendar are the minutes from August 9th, 2022. Do any commissioners have any comments on the minutes?
I did have a question about the copy that we would be receiving for the multifamily housing design guidelines. Is that something that's still in the works?
That's still in the works. The updated draft isn't quite ready yet, but when it is, we'll send that out.
Very good, thank you.
All right, any other commissioner discussion items?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the meeting of August 9th.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. All right, so this evening we have a public hearing for Project 22-769 Ordinance Amendments. What we're doing this evening is conducting a public hearing and consider recommendations to the Escalon City Council regarding amendments to the Escalon Municipal Code, Chapter 12.04, Curbs, Gutters, and Sidewalks, and Section 17.17.020, Development Standards. Can we please have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair. Just one moment. Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, before you tonight are possible ordinance amendments. The first being Chapter 12.04, Curbs, Gutters, and Sidewalks, which is attached as Exhibit A. Over the last several years, multiple construction projects have come before the Planning Commission. As a result of the above section of the municipal code, they were conditioned to install curb, gutter, or sidewalk along the frontage of their property. Both planning commissioners and city council members have mentioned feedback that they received from property owners, and they requested that the section of code be brought forward for possible edits. So before you tonight are some possible edits that are up for discussion. Staff, in preparation for this item, reached out to the League of California Cities HCED listserv. That's kind of like a electronic community of city planners and professional planners. in California. And the question was posed, how does your city handle installation of curb, gutter, and sidewalk on existing properties, developed properties? And so some of their thoughts are included in the attached, as well as some ideas from city departments. So some cities use the following prompts when requiring installation of street frontage improvements. 1, when new construction square footage exceeds a specified percentage compared to the existing structure. So for example, if they add a new structure to the property with a square footage that's more than, say, 25% of the existing house. Another prompt is when a construction value exceeds a certain dollar amount, such as a person pulls a permit with a construction value more than $50,000, $100,000, something along those lines. Some cities tell the homeowner that they're required to put in the curb gutter sidewalk, but then they allow them to execute a deferred utility agreement. So either they set a specified number of years before the person has to put it in, or they kind of leave it open as when the city tells you to do so. So maybe another project would be happening 30 years from then, and then they want to, have the person put it in, something like that. So some allow for a deferred improvement agreement. Other local agencies or departments suggested requiring installation in priority areas. So if you're within so many feet of a school, so many feet of a fire department, so many feet of some sort of public service location, that they are required to install it. Otherwise, maybe you fall back on one of the other prompts, a construction value or a size. And number 5, a combination of prompts where you exceed a construction value or a square footage, whichever is less or whichever is more. So for example, you would have to put in the public improvements if it's more than $50,000 or 500 square feet, whichever is more. The other section of code being discussed tonight is Chapter 1717020, Development Standards. That section of code is attached as Exhibit B. Council has noted increased litter in the commercial parking lot areas and the gutters around those commercial businesses. And so they would like to address ways to reduce litter in Escalon. One of those ways could possibly be local businesses or new construction or remodeled businesses having to put in a trash can along the front of their property, not necessarily out by the sidewalk, but maybe by the front doors of their building or along the walking path between the building and the parking lot. And so increasing trash receptacles in these locations could reduce the litter. It's recommended trash and or recycling cans be required near building entrances on new commercial projects or existing commercial locations, pulling a permit with construction value exceeding $10,000. So for both of these possible ordinance amendments, a notice of public hearing was published in the Escalon Times. It was also published on the city's Facebook page, also the city's website. The city did not receive any comments or inquiries on the items. So our recommendation tonight is that you conduct a public hearing and review and make recommendations to the city council regarding these 2 sections of the amendments.
Okay. Before we open up the public hearing, let's go around the horn and see if any commissioners have any comments. Let's start with you, Commissioner Engel.
I have no comments.
Commissioner Castellanos.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the deferred maintenance agreement, did you talk to any cities about that? And my question is that deferred agreement could be transferable if the property sells?
I did not get a copy of one, but it's recorded on the property itself. So even if the property sells to a new owner, that agreement is on the property.
Okay,
Yeah.
they would have to do it prior to the close of escrow or something, okay?
Depends how you would write it. It could be transferable to the next property owner if it's written that way, or required to be completed prior to sale.
Other questions?
Excuse me, Commissioner Willis.
Well, I do have a few discussion points. Do you want to go into things in depth at this point, or?
Sure, why don't we have the discussion and then we can open up the public hearing.
We have, we know if anybody else is there?
You don't go to? No.
No.
As far as construction value, you know, a dollar amount today is not gonna be the same as a dollar amount in the future. So I'm not in favor of putting a dollar amount on a construction value. It seems like a percentage there would make more sense. Now, as you just mentioned, the deferred agreement, what if someone with the property has a year to accomplish it, and then they sell it? Does that new owner get a year? What if they protest that they aren't being given enough time? Maybe it's a week into the year that it gets handed over to them, and, I mean, a year and a week, and
So
So-
they would be given that document when they're in process of buying it, and so they'd be made aware of that requirement before they purchase.
would there be any negotiation, or?
I mean, we don't have, flexibility-wise, if they were to call in and let us know that they need more time, I mean, we're pretty flexible with people. We would probably execute some type of amendment with them and then have it filed on the property. We've had that instance occur, what was it, the one that we most recently did with landscaping? A house sold before, it was a brand-new house that had transferred sale before they finished their landscape improvements. And so we worked with the person purchasing the home and executed an agreement to file on the property that they would complete the landscaping improvements within so much time. And we negotiated that with them, gave them an appropriate amount of time, and then advised them, here's the document, sign it, and then we file it on the property, and then they have that time period to address those landscape improvements. So,
I have a question. You have your recorded deferred maintenance, so that would be something that would be recorded. So if there was a preliminary title report, that title report would mention that. Okay.
yeah, and so that's how they would
Okay.
become aware. If they're interested in the property, they're gonna pull up that information, and so they should be made aware, hey, this has a requirement to have this done. And that's typically what happens with violations. If we have things in town and they don't get addressed and they end up being something that we're required to file a notice on the property for, either because they're not paying citations or they're not handling the nuisance, it gets filed on the property, so then the person who's looking towards buying it is made aware, you know, hey, this property has some, notice of violation on it, you might want to call in and find out what that's about. And then they typically call in and ask us for the information.
When it states priority areas, like near the school, I'm thinking the case we had not that long ago with the Clare property at Kern and Yosemite, right across the street from the school, but you had the grading on the rock surface that didn't line up with the driveway or the entrance to the alley, and so, and parts of the community are older and have situations that are weird. And when it comes to priority areas, you might think like the downtown or the center of town, or where there's a lot more foot traffic. And it could be the schools, but,
And that would be at planning commission's recommendation and council's direction. When it comes to specific types of grants, like the Safe Routes to School grants and the Active Transportation grants, park areas, schools, anywhere where children are is where they determine to be priority. And so those are the types of projects they like you to apply for, that they're most likely to give you funding for in the form of grants. Or areas where you can prove high volume of people being there. And so, downtown would fit in there just as much as schools, but for those type of grants specifically, they focus more on kids. And so I think that's where everybody's mind goes, where the schools are, because the kids are walking there and you want them out of the street if they're walking to school.
I have some other notes, but that's all for this time.
So my comments, before I get to my comments, Vice Chair Sarkozy.
Yeah, thank you. A couple, sorry, a couple questions. Under the development standard discussion paragraph, it mentions it is recommended, and then it talks about a value of $10,000. Is that the council that recommended that, or who
That's
recommended
staff's
it?
recommendation.
Okay, okay. And then the other thing, going to the other sections with curbs, gutters, sidewalks, I'm wondering if it makes sense to, I'm not quite sure what the best way to go about it is. A dollar amount could be it. I kind of like the first part about new square footage, but I wonder if we can also think about capping the amount. If we think about maybe there's some specific circumstances that make it more costly, and is that really fair to the homeowner, that burden? That, a person down the street, maybe it's gonna cost them, whatever, 10 grand to do it, but because of their specific instance, it's gonna cost them 20. I don't know what, if it is 20, how would you fill that gap? You'd still have to do it, but it'd be troubling to put that burden on the homeowner for a specific instance.
Anything else?
No.
All right, so my comments are this, and the reason that I brought this up for us to take a look at more closely was because I think it also depends on the type of project as well. So if it's new construction or a remodel, I think if the improvements or the addition exceeds 50% or more of the existing structure, then we can talk about it. But
You're talking about area, not
Correct.
value. Okay.
correct, 50% in square footage. And I used the example that we had with the gentleman from Roosevelt. All he was trying to do was improve his home and give his wife a half-decent walk-in closet, and EMC triggered upgrades to the curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and all he was trying to do. I don't think his plan was to go 50% bigger than what the total square footage of his house currently is, but I think 50% seems fair and reasonable. As far as construction value goes, and I'm throwing this out here to my fellow commissioners. Does it make sense to, instead of having a certain dollar amount, have it be, say, $10,000, $15,000 as of the date of this ordinance, and then adjusted for inflation and escalation for whatever time frame that is? So if right now $10,000 is $10 or $15,000, but given that the Fed just announced an 8% escalation last month, that's now you're talking $10,000. What was $10,000 in July is not $10,000 in September. So is there a way to tie not necessarily a dollar amount, but based off of the total valuation of the property at that time? So if they have a construction project and let's say it's a $30,000 project, but it's $500,000 in construction costs, I guess based off of percentage, like a 10% value of the overall property value. Is there a way to do it that way?
How do you determine property
I was
value?
gonna say,
That was my question. How,
So that would be like after the fact. So once they make that improvement to their property and it's final and it's forwarded over to the county, that's when they would go and update it, and it could take them a couple of years. It just depends.
But they
seems
don't,
like
they
that
don't assess to market rate.
Well, no, they don't. They just add it on to whatever they add on the value that was increased to whatever they have last in their, so the property comes in at value 52,000. It's our understanding they'll just take the 52,000 and add it on to whatever they have on file for the value of the house when it sold last.
Commissioner
Sale
Engel,
price.
what were you going to say?
It seems like that should be for discussion after closing the public hearing when we start making recommendations.
Well, I mean, I think that the construction value, I mean, that's just a guess, you know, and
We're talking about the requirements or things that we're imposing, so it doesn't look like anybody's on the line. If we're going to talk about recommendations for those 5 that are listed here under the discussion, that's just my opinion, that we should open the public hearing and close it, and then we can start working on the actual recommendations, because these are the items that you're referring to.
Can I share one other comment regarding the deferred approval? This is just an overall comment. The deferred approval kind of gets in a weird spot, and I'll explain later once we open the public hearing. I did have one question on the trash receptacles for staff. Are you aware of any requirements currently in the California Building Code that require any sort of outdoor receptacles? Because, you know, CBC recommends bike racks and things like other ancillary site furnishings. I was just wondering if there is any current code requirement specifically related to trash enclosure or trash receptacles.
Not that I'm aware of. We can check with the building official,
Okay.
who's more familiar with the building code and its ins and outs. But I'm thinking back through all the projects that we've sent through plan review through CSG, who checks for building code, and I can't ever recall something about a trash receptacle coming up as a comment.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other comments, we will open the public hearing at 6:55. If you have any comments, please come forward and state your name. All right, hearing none. Do we have anybody online?
No.
Okay, so we will close the public hearing at 6:55 and bring it back to Planning Commission for discussion. Let's start down the line. Commissioner Engel?
Sure, thank you. My suggestion would be to remove this from the development standards altogether, for multiple reasons. Number one, it discourages improvement because of additional cost to our residents. Number two, according to what we have here, Escalon Municipal Code 12.04.010, under findings, it says the existence of unimproved curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and streets adjoining dwellings and buildings within the city is found and declared to be prejudicial to the public health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants of the city. Well, I don't find that to be true, because if we improve one residence in the middle of a street, we're really just creating a safety hazard. Is somebody traveling down that street in the road really going to step off the road onto the sidewalk for that length of the property and then back into the road? Because if it does, I think that constitutes a tripping hazard, which, if those belong to us, I believe also puts us in legal harm. My third reason would be for beautification of our town. If we're looking at a street, Roosevelt, for example, and we want to request that residents install sidewalk, curb, and gutter, we're going to be doing this in phases. So what we're going to have is miscoloration, poor tie-in, poor elevation, and it's going to look like a mess when it's all done. And really, did we do justice to the street or to the town or to the occupant of that residence? My say would be no, we didn't. We really did the street a disservice and an injustice, costing them extra money and making their neighborhood look worse.
All right.
What's your suggestion?
We remove that from the development standards altogether and that we do not require residents to install sidewalk, curb, and gutter based upon any construction improvements on their property.
My only concern is if we remove it from this section 12.04, if there is a master plan community that comes in, how, and this is removed from the development standards, what is tying it back to like a master plan community? Because then there's no information in the municipal code related to curb, gutters, and sidewalks.
I appreciate that comment. However, you're in construction as well as I am. Do you really believe that a developer would come in and not install sidewalk, curb, and gutter to their development? Do you think that new homeowners would purchase in that development if it didn't have those amenities?
If I was a developer, I would say, well, you have nothing in the municipal code that requires it, so therefore I'm not going to do it.
So we have a whole section.
There's, okay, 12.04 is curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. 17.17 is development centers. That's two different things.
Correct.
So I'm not sure what I'm hearing here.
So, and then Chair Stroman is talking specifically to new subdivisions. We have a whole other section, Title 16, which addresses subdivisions.
Okay.
So Barbara's
That can still be
right.
a part of a map where we would, I wouldn't think that we would remove that out of a map when a developer comes in, because we condition that as a part of a map when you're developing, that you're putting all of the public, your civil improvements and include your public improvements, which are streets, sidewalks, curb, gutter, street lights, all of those things are required as a part of your civil improvements to be put in, so I don't think it would be removed, do you? We'd have to go through and look, but that seems like something that's automatic when you do a subdivision, unless otherwise discussed.
And my comment was only if, as long as it appears somewhere in the municipal code,
Yeah.
that's
we'll take
okay.
a look.
I don't know that chapter 16 requires curb, gutter, sidewalk, because chapter 12 requires it. I don't see us having it in two spots.
You understand what I'm saying, Commissioner Engel? I just want to make sure that if we're taking it out of this code, it's referenced somewhere else for future development, that's all.
Yeah, no, that I could definitely agree with that. I believe a new development should have sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. But for someone here, Roosevelt, for example, or anybody wanting to do a small addition to their house, a large remodel, shouldn't be penalized by having to pay additional money for a curb, a gutter, and sidewalk when the rest of the street isn't going to have it.
Well,
It really does pose some safety issues. People walking down that street aren't going to step off the street and then onto the sidewalk just for that one length of property and then step back off into the street. They're going to stay in the street. And if they do, it poses a tripping hazard at the entrance and the exit of the property, which puts us and the resident at liability, as well as just what it's going to look like. We know what concrete looks like when it's tied in, especially if it's several years separated. Now, if you look at, say, Roosevelt, and we got a remodel there every 2 years, it would be a hodgepodge of different finishes, colors, and looks. It wouldn't be uniform or contribute to beautification of the street or that section of our community.
For me, it's not, it's everything that you mentioned plus some. So picking on Roosevelt, for example, and then we'll go around the horn and get more comments. It's not only those items that you mentioned as well, but it's also saw cutting the existing asphalt to try to tie in the new gutter. And what happens if now you have an asphalt patch? What happens in the process of doing that? The city street subgrade has failed, and now you're having to, I mean,
Yeah, that was my reference to tie-in. Yeah, that was
exponentially. So it's not just curb, gutter, sidewalk. I mean, it could just go absolutely, before you know it, you could be spending $50,000, $60,000 on a curb, gutter, and sidewalk when all you're trying to do is add a $10,000 addition on the back of your house. And so it has the potential to just blow way out of proportion.
So I have just a question. I would think that the ultimate goal of the city is that all the streets have curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. How do we get that accomplished? I think that is our challenge that we have to figure out how to do that.
There were previous years when the city was more flush and could provide curb gutter sidewalk without hesitation when it was needed. And then as time has gone on, that's not the case.
Well, didn't we just get approval from SJ to spend $230,000 on safe streets? That sidewalk improvements could be,
Sidewalks can be.
How many
Part
feet
of
of
it.
sidewalk does that
included in
cover?
The sidewalks for, and it's my understanding, not so much here, but in other places that I've worked, one of the main reasons that they push for the property owner to put it in is because it costs the property owner a lot less than it costs the city to put in as well. Because we pay the prevailing wage where they can literally hire somebody and pay, however much they're needing to do, a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there. For us, it's usually double the cost.
but
So $235,000 doesn't go very far for sidewalks.
How many feet of sidewalk would that be?
I'm not even sure because the numbers are, lately they've been changing and we haven't had a sidewalk project.
Is that money we were just given, or did we apply for it?
So we would have to look into how much it would cost, but like you said, with costs of things, it would fluctuate. But our typical projects that we do in town, we try to do things all at once, and so when we're going to depending on the type of project, if we're doing an overlay, we basically keep it simple and do the overlay, but if we're doing the reconstruction, that's when we typically include the sidewalk as a part. And so the likelihood, to me, because I haven't seen it as a project where we literally just go in and put sidewalks in only, I haven't seen that here since I've been here. I don't know if you've seen it since you've been here.
We usually always connect it with the street
You try
project.
to connect it with something else, I guess, to get your biggest bang for your buck, because we keep a master inventory of where all the streets are at, level-wise and condition-wise. And
So we got
try to match that
we
with.
didn't ask for this 230,000, but we got it.
We did.
Do we periodically request grant monies to do sidewalks for beautification to ease safety concerns is that something that could roll around every year or two, or?
So the local transportation funds were originally targeted for our transit system, but we got a lot of COVID relief funding for our transit systems because that was a federal priority and state priority, and so it gave us the opportunity where this other monies were left over. It's a one-time thing at this time, and we've got permission from SJCOG to take that $235,000, which was money marked for a three-year period, and be able to use it on something else because it was just going to sit in a bank until we're able to use it. No other cities could get it because it was our allocation only. And their policy is we can't give it to somewhere else, where a lot of things we deal with on our end, if we don't use it, another city takes it from us because they have needs. And so it's my understanding, specific to those monies that were for transit, that's kind of like a one-time deal, happened because of COVID. I don't know the likelihood that would happen again. However, when we do have other LTF monies that we utilize for streets and roads, this was an additional amount that got added to it. Our other amount of LTF, I think the last time we looked, it was like 65,000. And so that doesn't do very much either. However, that's not to say that can't be utilized in some way, shape, or form. But it's typically, you don't typically see cities go in and do small areas because they usually pick up bigger areas to be able to do it because that's where it's cost effective to the town.
I would estimate the $235,000 to do approximately 10,000 linear feet.
How many house frontages is that?
Well, what's our average frontage here in town?
Like 800?
60, so.
60 feet.
Or 8, okay, 6, okay.
let's bring it back to the commission. Anything else, Commissioner Engel?
No, I think, I did want to just add, Barbara did correct me. I did not want to remove it from the development standards, which was EMC 1717. I wanted to remove it from EMC 12.04, curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. Thank you, Barbara.
Sure. Commissioner Castellanos?
I want to hear some more comments before I say anything.
Sure. Commissioner Willis?
I've been here 29 years, and this situation with the homeowner either not being able to put in the sidewalk or not wanting to put in the sidewalk, or maybe the situation on Roosevelt being what it is, I was fine the way the ordinance was, that the property owner had the responsibility, and several of the properties in town, people, while they were doing their remodeling or whatever, they were fine with putting in curbs, gutters. And so my druthers would be that we just leave it alone. But then looking at value and talking about property values, gosh, we're going up, we're going down, we're going up, we're going down. We don't want them to have to figure something out, I think. You know, if we just have to have something written in concrete, that's not flexible. That's all I'll say right now.
All right, Vice Chair Sarkozy.
Well, that is certainly an interesting comment from Commissioner Engel. I mean, you're thinking of Roosevelt, okay, to pick on that street, but it could be forever if we piecemeal it, construction-wise. You know, there could be houses on there that never have a new construction project, and there'd be 60 feet of no sidewalk. So I mean, that was a very good comment that makes me think that I mean, striking that from the code could be an option. That's all I have for now.
All right. So my take is that, and I respect everything that staff does, but I believe that putting in curb, gutters, and sidewalks is not a homeowner responsibility. I believe it's a City of Escalon responsibility. I understand why the code was written the way it was and the intention for it. But I can say, based on personal experience, I had some concrete flat work poured in my backyard. And there is no way I would want the person that did my concrete flat work in my front yard responsible for putting in a concrete sidewalk, curb, and gutter to meet the City of Escalon standards. Because while they were good and they were cheap, I think that they definitely weren't experts. I mean, and so when you're talking about a public improvement such as a sidewalk, curb, and gutter, it's kind of a big deal, because now whatever is placed, whatever concrete curb and gutter is placed, it has to meet city standards. And I mean, what happens if the homeowner puts it down and, like Commissioner Engel said, the finish is off? Or what happens if he or she gets a bad batch of concrete and has to add too much water, and then the color looks different? Honestly, as the city building inspector, he or she can come out and say, I don't like the color, rip it out and replace it. I don't like the finish, rip it out and replace it. And there's three things that you can always guarantee about concrete. Well, one of them is pretty standard, but it's changing now. 3 standards. It's gray, it's hard, and it cracks. You can always count on concrete for those 3 things. And when we're talking about such a public improvement of sidewalks, that's why I'm saying I believe that it's not a homeowner responsibility. I mean, if there's a beautification project, like let's talk about the proposed upgrades to the park on Main Street. that would be an appropriate time to look at, okay, what can we do to bring in a sidewalk? Or another city beautification project, or along Yosemite a couple of years ago when the improvements were made on Yosemite in front of Dent School. Those are the type of projects that I think we really need to look at a sidewalk. But for somebody coming before the planning commission that is applying for a conditional use permit or trying to add a pergola in the back of their house, and for the city municipal code to state, okay, now you have to spend $25,000, $30,000 at a minimum to put in a curb, gutter, and sidewalk, in my opinion, that's not the homeowner's responsibility. It's a public improvement, therefore, it should be paid for by the city of Escalon. Those are my thoughts.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
to the staff? Who is responsible for repair of the sidewalk? The property owner or the city?
Property owner. And that's in accordance with State of California Streets and Highways Code, so Caltrans law. And that's where, and you could adopt it additionally into your municipal code. We don't have it adopted additionally into the municipal code, but it's referred to State Highway Code because that's state law. And so you can utilize it, or you can make the option as a city to not require that. But because we don't have anything clear in the code, we follow state law. And so in terms of that, we've done a lot of improvements over the last 5 or 6 years with our risk management authority realizes that sidewalks are an issue, nationwide, statewide. Everybody has them, and there's always issues. And no matter how many, like Chair Stroman says, they crack. I mean, they're concrete, and so it's a continuous item. And so the RMA gives us $1,000 a year to put towards repairs that we're able to utilize.
$1,000 a year?
$1,000 a year, and then we take some money
That's
that
like
we have,
3 feet.
our public works super, because they give it to each city that's a member. And then our public works superintendent, with monies that he's able to, save or not utilize for any other needs that he has in that department, he'll take that money and match it, and we'll do an inventory of areas in town that need it. We focus in on city properties, parks, our properties, making sure that those areas, our public spaces, have repairs made. And then anything that's left over, anybody that is on our list of people that were notified that there's a issue with their sidewalk, we reach out to them and we tell them, because we also have access to this company that specializes in cuts. They don't grind, they cut. We set up a few days where they come into town, and we give them a quote. We get the quotes for everybody, and we tell them, if you pay the city $40 to take care of your, half-inch lift in your sidewalk, we can have this company come to your house and make the repair for you. And so that's been pretty successful with people in town, because it's a break, it's not a repair, and they don't have to hire someone. And this person goes around town and will address everybody. We've talked about trying to do that more frequently, and we're still trying to work out details where we either go into neighborhoods or go into specific areas. The issue lies when, is it over 1.5 inches? There's certain sizes where it's not repairable anymore. You can't cut it because it's not going to be worth it, and those are replacements, and that's where they have to pull out that whole portion and replace it.
Well, and I don't want to speak for Commissioner Engel, but my issue is not the repair. I mean, the repair makes sense. If I have a 6-foot section that needs to come out because of something related to my property, no problem. I'm fine with that. Where I have the issue is when you're requiring a homeowner to put in a whole frontage of curb, gutter, and sidewalk when they're just trying to make improvements. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
I had two thoughts. So the repairs that were made on McHenry with the tree roots, just the property owners, individual property owners pay for all that repair?
So the ones that were up towards here were actually approved by council a little bit over a year, maybe 2 years ago.
So the city
We got a
took
little
care of
bit
it?
behind. Council approved to take care of that area because it became a concern for a lot of people utilizing McHenry. But the ones that were made more recently in front of our building were a part of our sidewalk, RMA funding, yeah.
Well, so what would be wrong with us leaving it the way it is and just dealing with case-by-case basis, like we did with Roosevelt and Kern and?
And I wanted to just address too, because you were mentioning like putting it into to city standards and stuff, and we do have standards and specifications that we require people to meet because it's sidewalk that's going in the public right away, and we want to make sure that it's equipped to be sidewalk and that it's installed properly. And so we typically require the encroachment permit, where you would pull the permit, and that's where our superintendent or crew leader would go out, and they do a pre-inspection meeting, and Justin will go over everything, or Jake will go over what the requirements are, what they're looking for, help them with any questions they have, give their number to reach out. We're very hands-on when it comes to that stuff, and our practice has been in the last few years that we waive the permit fee if you're putting in the sidewalk, because that's a benefit to everyone, so we waive that fee for the permit. We don't waive the inspection fees, because that is typically, if it's not Justin that's doing it, it might be our engineer, and that's a pass-through that we get charged for. But we're able to waive the city's fee for the permit. And that's been that's gone really well. We haven't had very many people that aren't doing it correctly, because we've made it very user-friendly in the aspect, here's the phone number to the superintendent, give him a call, he'll meet you at your property, and he goes out there and he goes over everything. And he'll come out there, if you have questions and need help. And so our Public Works Department is very hands-on, where if they know you need help, they're going to be there and try to make sure you do it correctly so that you don't have to go back and rip things out.
Councilman, can I ask another question to staff, please?
I'm the planning commission chair.
No, the chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair Stroman, may
Yes,
I
sir.
have the floor?
Sure.
I have another question for staff.
Go ahead.
What is the council's feeling on this issue with sidewalks requirements, with any sort of permit construction improvements on the property? What's their feedback?
So I know we have members of council that are definitely interested in using local transportation funds to help cover costs of sidewalks. I definitely know they don't want it to be a burden on people, but they haven't necessarily, that's what this item is for, to bring it to them to discuss more clearly. We haven't really gotten that direction yet. This item came to Planning Commission, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and we had provided examples from other cities and how they had done it. And at that time, if I recall correctly, the council didn't, or the commission didn't have any recommendations. That you guys had kind of basically said, let's leave it the way it is and see what council says. And when we brought it back to them, I don't think there was any consensus. I know there were a few opinions on trying to find different ways to go about it. And so I can't recall if there was any other direction given at that time. And so it ends up coming back here. And it's a struggle for every city. And so if it takes a while for us to figure out what the best way is, we can do that. Remember when you're moving forward with policy, sometimes it plays itself out, and then you kind of learn from it, and then we make adjustments to it. There's always that option specific to the case for the one on Kern, where they had more of a hardship issue. And that's when they can come to, Planning Commission for an exception or variance or things like that, and kind of go through that process. But really, I don't have a clear from the entire council what their direction is. But I know commercial-wise, they were willing to update that because of the issue with the trees, and that the fact that the city had required the developer to put in the trees. So,
I have one more question, and what has been the feedback from the applicants when they come in to pull a permit and they're told, you know, because of whatever, because of how it's written, you gotta put sidewalks in? What's been the response of the applicants? I mean, have they been up in arms, or?
I mean, we've had a few that don't like it.
Most of the ones who haven't liked it are the ones that you have seen, that they've
Yes,
been here for a use permit or a variance, and
If
that
they
they
don't
have.
like it, they're strong about not liking
Did
it.
Mr. Thomas have to put in sidewalk on Mitchell, or was it already there?
Who on Mitchell?
Chaco,
Oh,
Thomas.
side.
Oh,
There was one there.
there was a sidewalk already there?
He did the dedication, though. We didn't have the right of way in that area, so he had to dedicate it to us.
yeah, he dedicated.
I
Yeah,
believe
I
there's
can't
sidewalk
remember.
on that side. I think it's the other side that doesn't have sidewalk.
And I haven't looked lately, but is there sidewalk along the Kraft Heinz? There still isn't, right?
No.
Yeah.
How about this, folks? One little word could really set this yay or nay. And that, it's a choice of words. I think most of my concern is for homeowners. I'm not concerned about commercial development, commercial improvement. So what if we amended this section of code specifically related to commercial developments and not necessarily make it implied for residential projects? That's my concern.
To clarify, because residential projects would include subdivisions, would you still want to apply it to, like, actual housing subdivisions? That
Well,
they put in sidewalks at the.
New
point.
projects.
New projects.
New subdivisions.
New residential
right, so
subdivisions.
new subdivisions, I think, should do it,
Okay.
no matter what. To Commissioner Engel's point, that seems like a no-brainer, but, if a developer doesn't see it there, then he's gonna say, I don't have to do it. My concern is that our average homeowner wants to do a little project and, oh, sorry, you don't have a sidewalk, gotta do sidewalk. That's the burden, that's the hardship that we don't want homeowners to place, that burden to be placed on them. So what if we amended this section and added this requirement specifically for all commercial developments and added an exemption for residential? That way, it's not on so much the little guy, if you will. Because if you look at the difference between residential construction and commercial construction can actually build the cost into the cost of the project. The opposite of that is our friend on Roosevelt, who's adding on to his house and telling him, you need to do curb, gutter, and sidewalk now, and there goes the budget of his project. The Kearns, on Kern Street, same thing. Trying to tell them to put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk, they would have had to talk to PG&E to get that pole moved, so if you go back and you look at the decisions over the last 3, 4, 5 years that the Planning Commission has made, and the people that have come before the Planning Commission, all of those people that have come before the Planning Commission are homeowners. They're residential type projects. So therefore, I'm suggesting that we amend this section of the code specifically related to commercial construction projects and add an exemption for residential type projects.
What are your thoughts on vacant residential land? We have some lots in town that are in existing subdivisions, but it's just vacant dirt. California Irwin area has a 2-acre piece that wouldn't be a new subdivision per se, no mapping involved, but would be residential. It's lacking sidewalks. And there's a couple other vacant pieces of land in town that don't have sidewalks. If they build a new house,
I
think
think,
they should have to put in sidewalk.
but wouldn't that would trigger the new construction though? That's not 12.04, and that's where I was confused earlier. Is 12.04 specifically towards renovations, or is that towards new construction and renovations? So if it's related to new construction, I think if it's a single-family dwelling, then they should consider putting in a curb, gutter, and sidewalk, because that's part of the 15 feet PUE.
Chapter 12 would be for new or existing streets, sidewalks, public places.
Maybe the qualifier would be, for that vacant lot, if you're having a new sewer connection, that's the trigger to have to install curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
So yeah, most vacant properties, because they're not developed, most of them don't have the connections at all. So that would trigger as new.
So if it's new construction, if it's a new single-family home, and they're tying into the utilities, then yes, they should meet the intent of the Escalon Municipal Code to put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk. However, if it is a renovation, single-family home, or same thing with multifamily. If it's a new multifamily project, yeah, they should consider putting in curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The multifamily housing project can afford that into their budget of the project.
You ask the developer that, they're gonna say, I can't afford that, that's expensive.
Yeah, they can.
Most of the developers we have will automatically know that it's required. Developers at larger projects like that, they usually don't flinch with it. However, we have seen developers that are interested in doing projects that don't have sidewalks. That was something new, but we had a project that was going to move forward, or was looking to move forward a few years ago over there off the 2-acre piece on First Street. It was the senior market rate houses. They were proposing the 18 units, but they were going to be high-end senior housing. They had mentioned to us that they wanted to propose no sidewalks. However, that was because they were proposing, they were going to end up proposing a private road that would be, gated, and you would go in, and it would be just for those houses and anybody who came in through that gate. And so because they were privately maintaining it, and they were going to provide public parking and not allow parking on the street in front of the houses, only in the driveways, they felt like that would work with how they drafted it. And that's something that can always come when projects move forward to Planning Commission and Council. That's something that can always be discussed in the event that they have a reasoning for not wanting to put in sidewalks. They can always apply for that as a part of their application for site architecture and development, and present that. And we would advise you, code says sidewalks required. However, this project is looking to not have sidewalk required, and have you guys address that at the time of application or prior to approval.
Stay the same.
But in here, this is for both residential and commercial. My recommendation is every time, how many projects have we had recently where people,
Two.
just Roosevelt and
Kern.
Kern?
Roosevelt and Kern, we had the one on the corner of Irwin and First. They put the
Oh, that
sidewalks in. They ended up putting them in.
And then next door to him also put it in.
Next door to him put them in, yeah.
How did and I've asked about this before and I'm a little bit confused. So the quote-unquote renovation to the old Brayton house, they put in all new sidewalks around. We never saw that project because that was considered a renovation. But did they just do it just to do it, or what triggered that new sidewalk?
I think they volunteered
They
to
volunteered to do it
repair
because
it.
they didn't like how the sidewalks looked. And so they offered to replace them. And then we were,
So Second Street?
yeah. Yeah, that's one of the older, obviously, one of the older areas in town, and the sidewalks aligning to their property were pretty crumbled. And so they didn't like the way they looked, and it's gonna have their brand-new house on the corner with these sidewalks, and so they offered to update them.
Did they put a sidewalk in front of that house on Vine?
They will.
They will?
The
Okay.
2221?
The narrow one.
Yeah,
close to the
shotgun house, huh?
They will.
Is that the last lot?
2221 Vine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will because they're new.
The way the current code is written, 1204030, any person who constructs or causes to be constructed any building or dwelling in the city shall construct curbs, gutters, sidewalks. That's for residential and commercial. If you want to exempt, you could add an exemption worded in such a way that any lot with an existing dwelling or any project to an existing lot with an existing dwelling would kick out additions, remodels, patios, garages,
Sounds like an easy fix.
things like that.
I'm just trying to save staff time too, to stop people coming from, that fighting us on that one little section. Commissioner Castellanos, you're being quiet this evening. What do you think?
Well, I have a philosophy, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I like the idea that on unique situations where it makes sense, you don't ask them to put curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. My concern is if we delete it, no one on any of these existing homes on these streets will ever want to put a sidewalk in. You know, it's gonna be up to the city to put it in, which means somewhere down the road, somebody's gonna have to pay for that. I mean, I've been on the planning commission on and off for 30 some odd years, and, this rarely comes up.
And it kind of looks mixed up because we've driven around a few times and there's areas, the newer areas obviously have sidewalk, throughout the subdivision. The somewhat older areas appear to have sidewalk on one side of the street and not on the other. And then the older areas had sidewalk, but the sizing's increased since then, so it's smaller
Or all there
sidewalk.
are is just curbs.
And then there's areas that don't have any,
Yeah,
and so.
where my son lives, is both sides of the streets are just curbs.
Well, you bring up a good point, about, say I'm doing a renovation, I'm just saying enter the existing code, and maybe my sidewalk's okay, but it's too narrow, doesn't meet code. Does that trigger anything as well?
If you
To
already
widen?
have it and it's existing.
We wouldn't pick on that.
Would not?
no.
I mean, unless you went in there and did something to it, if you altered it or removed it, or, then that's.
Or if it wasn't
that-
ADA
that would
compliant.
trigger-
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's existing, it's okay. They allow existing.
I mean, I think, look how much nicer First Street is where the old lumber yard is. I mean, that looks really nice. Hopefully someday Roosevelt Street will look really nice. But if we say no curbs, gutters, and sidewalks on existing stuff, that'll never get done unless somebody raises all those homes and builds something else.
Commissioner Willis?
Well, let me understand you, Steve. You're saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So it can stay the same, and the commission can just deal with individual cases for variances and stuff like that?
Well,
For
yeah.
the oddball situation.
Yeah, if it economically, it's gonna be impossible because, there's a PG&E line, or there's an SSID line, or, you can't disrupt that and have it make sense,
And I think, like Mr. Mahias, he was very agreeable, he did it, no problem, and then the one on Roosevelt was a totally different situation, but you still might have somebody saying, hey, you made me do it, and you're not making him do it. But I still like the idea of us dealing with individual cases that create hardships or whatever.
Commissioner Engel, any additional thoughts?
Personally, I like Diana's idea to add it as an exemption for any pre-existing dwelling.
do we want to take your idea, do we want to expand upon it based off the particular project type, whether that is a renovation, a patio, a pergola, an outdoor restroom, et cetera, et cetera? That way it's very clear that if somebody comes before staff with a pergola, a patio, whatever, it's very clear that, okay, this is an exemption, so I don't have to worry about it. Just trying to find a way to make it easier for staff to be able to enforce. Any thoughts, ideas on that?
Well, you have a house that's ready to be torn down,
Okay.
right?
Right.
If I keep one wall up, I am exempt on certain permits. And so everything else is gonna be brand new except that one wall. Is that a new construction or is that a remodel?
In my opinion, that's new construction.
But it's not.
Technically, it counts as a
Technically, it's a
remodel,
remodel.
correct?
It's a remodel. You're not paying school fees. You know, you're not paying
It's a
road
benefit
impact
to the
fees.
homeowner.
And what were the things you mentioned, Sean? I mean, because a pergola can be 10 by 10 or it can be 20 by 20. I mean, you say that there's a pergola, you know, you
I
have,
was thinking,
you get into qualifying dimensions and size and
but
volume.
even a 20 by 20 pergola, that's in the backyard. That has nothing to do with putting in a curb gutter and sidewalk on the front of the property.
I'm gonna put a accessory unit on my 18,000 square foot lot in town.
Okay?
So that's already state regulated that we can't.
Can't
we have to
touch
follow
ADUs.
State law all the way
Yeah.
on that. And they say you can't touch them on
You
anything.
can't require them to put.
You can't require them to put in a sidewalk. You can't
Okay.
require them to do anything additional. Yeah, we've already,
Thank you, State of California.
yeah, ADUs
Well,
are,
it's
can't
gonna
touch
get
them,
worse.
so.
So there's the out. The guy doesn't want to pay for a curb gutter sidewalk, so he puts in a PDU in the backyard, just to avoid that.
Oh, man. So don't worry about the addition, just put a whole new ADU in the back and you'll be fine.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
You know, when we talk about, you know, whether it's new or a renovation, I mean, maybe it does go back to one of the recommendations early on from another city about the square foot of the addition. You know, if we're worried about, you know, keeping one wall up, my opinion would be if they're going to that type of construction, they're going to replace the sidewalk anyway. But, you know, by saying 50, 75%, if you're adding 75%, you know, that's a large project, or even 50%. That's a large project that, as you described it, could be absorbed much better than a kitchen renovation or a pergola. Maybe that's a way to kind of be a catch-all, where it's not targeting the smaller projects that's such a financial burden.
Well, if you got a small lot, you already built your home, you won't be able to almost half the size of it, because then you're not gonna meet, you're gonna exceed the lot coverage rate. I mean, there's all these little.
Well, that's why I was thinking that if we went back to a percentage and had it as like renovating or adding on to 50% or greater of the total gross square footage of the property, then that would trigger maybe a sidewalk. But
Chair, what if we move on to the development standards and come
Okay.
back to this since we seem to have stalled a bit?
okay, sounds fair.
And maybe it'll gel in our heads.
Okay. So does anybody have any comments on the recommendations to EMC 17.17.020?
I would, as I go around town, I will see a Taco Bell cup 6 blocks away, or a Burger King cup, or a Pizza Plus cup. You know, and then you drive around and look at trash receptacles, they're way back in front of the store, recessed from the road, and I think people are buying these things, as soon as they're done, they're throwing, to do more, the construction that's talked about here, you're trying to make over what people do. You're trying to determine behavior. And if somebody already litters, they litter. And if they don't take it upon themselves to throw something away, they won't. It seems like we have plenty of trash receptacles around town. The ones that are rounded, they're attractive. Maybe people are too used to seeing them. They're not novel anymore. Or even the squared off ones where you got recycle and trash. I lived in a community once where they painted all the fire hydrants to look like people, so we could paint the trash receptacles to look like people. Maybe the novelty would get people to use them more, but I'm not sure that requiring new trash receptacles in front of a construction value exceeding 10,000. I'm just not sure that that's the solution. That's my thought.
Commissioner Engel.
I agree. I don't think the addition of a trash can near the entrance of a building is going to encourage the person walking down the sidewalk to walk up to an establishment's front door and throw it away. People that litter are gonna litter.
All right. Commissioner Castellanos.
Americans are just slobs. I mean, that's.
Not to cast aspersions or anything like that.
I mean, it's like, it's like anything, You go to Marvell's and how many people can't walk their shopping cart back? They leave it in somebody else's parking spot, That's a behavioral thing that is going to be really difficult. Jeremy, this could be a good service project, possibly.
For the Lions.
Service organizations, to do something to spruce up some of the trash receptacles
Well, speaking to that, we do that mile stretch right here on McHenry, and I have to say that it's pretty bad.
It is.
Vice Chair Sarkozy.
So I'll be the odd person out here. I think for new commercial construction, they should be required to have a trash can out in front. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of Dollar General, not to pick on Dollar General, and have my receipt in my hand, and I immediately have already crumbled it up, and they don't have a trash receptacle out there. And then it ends up in my cup holder. It's not going to solve the trash problem, but I just think it should be there.
Right.
Is there an estimated cost at what these receptacles would cost these new businesses or businesses pulling a permit?
I've been looking at trash cans because the city's going to be adding some more in some areas. The cheaper ones are $400 or $500. These are like the metal outdoor sturdy ones. If you want the really fancy ones, they're like $1,000, $1,500.
Well, San Francisco, didn't they get some for $20,000 or something?
Oh, they have some that are robotic and they're Bluetooth to your phone, and they tell you they're compactors. They tell you when they alert you that it's full and you need to come change it. Yeah, there's some really, really nice ones.
I used to work in unincorporated San Pablo, which is by Richmond, and they couldn't keep trash cans because everybody would steal them all the time. And so they made the big concrete trash cans that weighed hundreds of pounds, so you couldn't move them. And so if we wanted to relocate it, we'd have to have somebody come in to relocate it. But those ones always attracted the graffiti, and so I would be out there frequently painting garbage cans to cover graffiti, but that was the only way we could keep them because they used to get stolen.
So, Vice Chair Sarkozy, you're not the odd man out. I agree with Commissioners Willis, Engel, and Castellanos that this is probably a human behavior issue, not necessarily a commercial development issue. But at least if it's there, it's an option. People are still gonna do what they're gonna do. But at that point, if the receptacle is in, then it becomes a matter of public health due to trash. So I would agree with you that if a project, like for example, the new convenience store that's planned at 120, or at McHenry and First, put a darn trash can out front. Because otherwise, guess what? Somebody walks out of that convenience store and there's no receptacle. Where's their trash gonna go? Right on the ground. And if, I understand you can't change human behavior, but for the mature adults in the room, if I have a cup or something, most of the time, we try to teach our kids, just throw it away. It's not that hard. So I'm in agreement with you that if a project is gonna cost $10,000 or more, have them put in a trash can. I mean, we don't want the Bluetooth-enabled trash compactor, et cetera, for $10,000, but at least get a half-decent trash, commercial-grade metal trash receptacle to put outside and have it bolted to the ground.
I have a question. Is it possible you could put in the business license application that, you know, if you have a business, that you need some sort of a trash receptacle near the entrance or exit of your door?
Chapter 5 of the municipal code is business license. More of a development standard than business license is like application paperwork fees. Development standards is more like a physical.
Okay. I was just thinking of, you know, so any business in town is notified that, hey, you know what, you know, if you got a restaurant, you know, have a trash receptacle that people can throw something away, or, you know.
But this will trigger it because they're pulling a building permit to do renovations, and now they know, oh, I need to get a trash can out in front.
And it would be something that would, you know, be notified to them prior to final, you have to install your trash can. And so they wouldn't get their final on their building permit until the trash can's in and signed off.
So all new construction area will be clean, and all existing places will be dirty.
Be under code enforcement.
Well, back to service clubs, when I drive by El Portal, I can't remember if there's a trash receptacle on the outside of the cyclone fence or only on the inside. So a service club might be able to approach the school district and put a trash receptacle maybe closer to the street in a situation like that, or,
That area's come up before.
Yeah.
As it's a high volume for litter. That's one of the areas that's been described to us
Well,
as a
and-
problem area for litter.
and we have the dispenser on Brennan for dog bags and whatnot, and if you're walking your dog and you've gone beyond that point, are there other places with dog bags and, not that I want the lines.
Not in that vicinity.
No,
Just at the
no,
park.
but just that trash needs to be located periodically, trash receptacles, so.
If there's a large amount of trash out in front of El Portal, that seems like a great Saturday school project for the students at El Portal. But
That's,
tried to-
that's abuse, you know.
Yeah. We tried to have trash receptacles and recycling put in at Farinelli, didn't we?
We did.
And the neighborhood was very upset. They did not want them in the neighborhood. And so I think they did get installed and we had to pull them out. Because the neighborhood was very upset about the trash cans being installed there because they figured it would attract people to bring litter there. Among other things, they didn't think it was aesthetically pleasing in that area. And that park is a little different looking compared to other parks in town. And so we went ahead and removed them. I think we put out a survey first and surveyed the area first. The majority was remove them, and so we ended up removing them from that park.
That strip of green grass, that's a landmine of dog stuff. And there's No receptacles.
All right, let's bring it back to the commission. Do we have any motions on this particular item?
Do you want to
Actually,
combine the two, or?
that's up to, do we want to combine them? Do we want to separate them? What's people's thoughts?
After hearing Commissioner Sarkozy's comments, I could definitely get behind his point of view. I think it makes sense.
Is a $10,000 amount adequate?
I believe so.
So new construction, obviously new commercial or industrial development, but if they pull a permit, commercial re-roofs, they're like 25, 30,000. $500 garbage can out front. Is fair? Okay.
If they don't already have one?
They
500,
don't already have one. Yeah, a lot of places already have them. This would just catch the few that don't.
$500 metal bolted to the ground. That would be my recommendation.
And then just to make it clear too, we would also put into there that they need to continuously maintain it. Which
That's a
means
big
keeping
item.
it look nice and continuously dumping it so that people can throw in it.
And would you want to have samples? I mean, you'd have like a website that would show what would meet our standards, or?
Sure,
ask,
if
we
they
always
needed help,
provide.
yeah, if they needed help identifying, we could assist them with
Okay.
that.
Sean, rather than metal, would you agree to non-removable? What if they had stone facade or something to match the architecture of the new building?
That's fair.
Commercial grade,
Non-movable?
commercial, permanent,
I
commercial.
just don't
grade.
want somebody going to Costco and buying a Rubbermaid $39.95 special, throw it out there. So,
We could
On
say
wheels.
commercial,
yeah,
commercial grade,
Yeah,
permanent.
matches or fits in with the site.
or imagine like one of those bright yellow ones sitting out front. They would,
Okay, gut fill's
Okay.
coming out in 5 minutes. Can we get this done?
if you wouldn't stop talking and actually make a motion, maybe we
Well,
could get something done.
There's the DVR.
No, we don't have one.
Oh, no.
So what's the consensus on those then?
All right, so let's take it back to the other item. Any other, do we have any motions related to the curb gutter sidewalk? How is it? We add the exemptions. Commissioner Castellanos said if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We talked about ADUs. We can't even talk about ADUs. Any ideas, thoughts there?
I'll motion to amend EMC 12.04 to include exemption for existing dwellings.
Okay.
Could we put existing habitable dwellings? I'm thinking there's a couple of
Yes.
vacant
Yes.
land that have a structure.
Yes.
But it's like a condemned structure.
That makes sense.
Okay.
It does.
All right, so we have a motion. Any seconds related to that?
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have any other motions on the table?
Do we want to add the motion for the development standards? Or did we already have that?
So, Commissioner Engel, are we rolling in the requirements or the modifications to EMC 17.17.020 to your motion related to the trash cans?
I believe those would be, we would need to vote on that separately, am I correct?
It's one agenda item.
One agenda.
Either or is fine.
Sure, yeah, we can go ahead and roll in the approval of EMC 17.17.020.
So we
Add increasing a trash receptacle in locations, pulling a permit in the value exceeding $10,000 is to read permanent, non-movable.
Commercial grade, permanent attachment to the ground and continuously maintained.
Beautiful.
Okay, so we have an amended motion. Do we have a second?
I will second again.
With an amended second?
Could you read that motion again? I want to understand what we're voting on. I'm sorry.
It was a motion to amend 12.04050 to add an exemption for, to not require those curb gutter sidewalk improvements for lots that have existing habitable dwellings on them. And then amendment to 17.020 that commercial businesses have to install a trash can near entrances of their project if pulling a permit with a construction value exceeding $10,000, and they must install a trash can that is commercial grade, permanently attached to the ground, and they have to continuously maintain it.
Okay, any other discussion?
Thank you for cleaning up my language.
Thank you, no worries.
With that, we'll roll into a vote. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Any exemptions? Passes 4-1. Thank you all for the lively discussion. All right, next item, administrative matters. Staff?
I have none.
A mistake.
Okay. Matters presented from the audience. We have no members of the audience. Do we have anybody joining us on the call?
I believe so.
Still no.
Okay. With that, staff communications.
We will be having our October 11th meeting. We have 2 projects on the agenda. Almond Grove Mobile Home Park is looking to get an approval of a conditional use permit to add 6 additional manufactured units to the property. So they'll be coming to us for a conditional use permit on that. And Orlando's Market has submitted their signage package, and it is a bit larger than what our municipal code allows. So they're coming to us for a variance for their signage. Also tomorrow, the city's having workshops at 10:30
10:30.
and 5:30. We have some downtown improvement projects that we have conceptual plans for. It would be First Street east of McHenry, First Street around, and then down Main Street to St. John. So if you're available to come to the workshop,
10:30 and 5?
10:30 and 5:30. It's this, right here in council chambers. It's the same presentation, it's just 2 different times for accommodate people's schedules. That's all I have.
And for me, you may recall at one of the last council meetings, we discussed smoke shops. As you may recall, there's a smoke shop in town that made its mark in town so far, and so the municipal code currently doesn't have any regulations specific to smoke shops. Council has asked that we draft something to put together addressing some specific areas they wanted to see addressed regarding smoke shops, and so staff will be working on that. It won't be coming to the October meeting. We're probably looking more like November. And try to move that forward, a draft ordinance for Planning Commission's edit, review, and recommendation. Trying to think if there's anything else. A lot of things going on, but nothing that I can pinpoint. I think that's it. Next council meeting is Monday, the 19th, and so regularly scheduled meeting.
The MSR is going to council
MSR is going to be
Monday.
on that agenda, which is obviously what you guys had already reviewed and recommended, so we'll be going that night to planning, or to council.
Anything else? All right. Commissioner Communications, Commissioner Castellanos.
I have none other than good report like always.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Engel,
I have none. Thank you, everybody.
Commissioner Willis,
I have none. Thank you, everybody.
Vice Chair Sarkozy.
Just a question about workshop tomorrow. How long, it starts at 10:30. How long would you expect it to be?
I I'm thinking noon, depending on how many people show up. I would anticipate more people are gonna come to the evening one than the morning one.
I think
It just depends how many people are there.
I think the presentation itself, our engineers will be here, 2 of our engineers will be here to go over the project. They have a PowerPoint, explain the scope of work for the project, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then it'll just be audience questions after that.
Discussion, yeah. Which we want to provide time, so I mean, if it goes on, we're gonna honor it, we're not gonna cut anybody off, so.
I've got a commitment at 10 to 11, so I just, if it was over by 11, I wouldn't run over. No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Believe it or not, I have nothing either. So we will adjourn the meeting at 8:02 PM.
Thank you.
I know.
Stop the recording.
Over here, you're